Welcome to our next interview from Roots to Passions with Matthew Burfield. In this new interview series, we want to learn more about exceptional practitioners who've developed their passion for education from their formative experiences. Join us for a peek behind the curtain of some outstanding international educators and how they've achieved their success. Our guest today is Matthew Burfield, Senior Vice President at GEMS Education. Matthew is the Principal and CEO of the most successful school opening in GEMS history, at GEMS Founders School in Dubai, where he is the founding principal in September 2016. Involved in the development and opening of 5 new schools, Matthew is also a member of the executive board for both the British Schools of the Middle East and the Association of British Schools Overseas. Welcome, Matthew. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Claire. It's lovely introduction and pleased to be with you.
Well, thank you. Okay, we're going to jump straight in. I want to ask you, first of all, about your own experiences of school. So what was school like for you as a child, or what were your kind of lasting impressions of school?
So I have to go a long way back now, Claire, but if I go back into my first school in Caistron-on-Sea in Norfolk, so I started there as a child. There were lots of positive experiences as a child, and certainly school, I remember lots of great things that happened at school, but I had quite a troubling childhood. I had a difficult childhood, so my home wasn't a particularly safe place to go to. So I think my memories of school are positive because that was a really safe place to go, and I had some wonderful teachers along the way. But yeah, home life was very difficult and very traumatic in many ways. I won't dwell on it too much, but was a challenging place to be. So going to school for me was actually a relief or a release. And one particular teacher I remember, I was actually talking about him when I was doing a presentation at the weekend. His name's Mr. Watson. And he was this wonderful history teacher. I met him when I was in year 7, so 12 years old. And he was just the most wonderful man, created this safe space. So really passionate about history as well, which I like to think I am too. I don't know whether I reached his levels ever, but I really got passionate about history with him. But he was also just this lovely male role model for me, because my one at home wasn't very great, but this one just gave me this lovely safe feeling and allowed me to know who I was or learn who I was at 11, 12 years old. And so it was a really positive space and place in that sense. And Mr. Watson's somebody that I've remembered throughout my entire career. I mean, I became a history teacher because of Mr. Watson. There's no doubt in my mind about that. And he was one of the first, or not quite the first, that's a lie. My mum was the first person I called, but he was the second person I called when I became a head teacher, and wanted to let him know that has happened, and talk to him about his impact on me. I was at that point in my life and career where I'd worked through a lot of the other stuff, and so I was in a place where I could talk to him about that, and so pleased I did, because he did pass shortly after that, but so pleased I had that moment to remind him of how important he was as a teacher, not just to me, but I'm sure to many children that went through his classroom.
Oh, absolutely. How incredible you were able to do that for him. You know, it's always those experiences that you kind of hold dear. You remember those encounters, don't you? And I think that you remember certain students for moments like that. So well, it's an incredible experience to give to him, to kind of go back and let him know what an impact he made on your life. You've kind of given us a kind of small insight there into that, you know, home life might have been quite difficult, and so early school life might have been quite tricky. Knowing then that children come to school potentially with some kind of adverse childhood experiences, how was that then in your decision to become an educator? That must have been quite difficult to make that decision to be that presence in the classroom, or was it quite a natural decision after, you know, your influences from Mr. Watson, for example?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't think it was easy. I think there was a lot of conscious and deliberate choice in it. And I think what I hope I hold myself to quite high standards when it comes to gratitude and kindness, particularly, which I think there's always a space in the world for more of that. But, you know, in terms of what I thought I could bring, and, you know, again, as a young man, I'm not such a young man anymore, but, you know, as a young man, you kind of think you're invincible, and you think, well, you know, I can do this and I can take on this. And you forget some of the things that you're carrying, and you need a little bit of time to get to that point. And it probably wasn't until, you know, my late 20s, early 30s, where I really started to deal with some of those traumatic moments. So in my early 20s, getting into teaching, I think I was probably a bit more brash. I'm like, of course I can do this. But on reflection, it was a very deliberate, conscious choice, and it was based on, the fact that this man, Mr. Watson, had such a huge influence in my life. My mum was a teacher, a primary school teacher, and so I'd seen what she was able to do. She worked in some quite tough and challenging areas, and was a Senko, so she worked with really high needs, vulnerable children for many years, and so I got to see that and that insight on how full that could make you, how that could really fill your cup. And so I felt that that was definitely a pathway for me. I think what I brought to it was a real insight into understanding that when a child is behaving in a certain way, whatever that way may be, it's not okay as a teacher, and it's never okay as a teacher to kind of go after that child and to chase them down for that negative behaviour. And I definitely experienced that at school. I wasn't the best behaved child at school, that's for sure. But I don't remember too many people allowing me the space that Mr. Watson did. There were a lot of teachers that kind of chased you down and would, not, I don't want to go as far as belittle, but they'd certainly make you feel really bad for that behaviour. And few ask the right question of, well, where's that behaviour coming from? And so I'd like to believe, and you'd have to go back and ask my students, but I'd like to believe I became a teacher very quickly that asked that question. So, okay, and I started my career, and I'm sure we'll talk about, started my career in South London, which was a very challenging place to start. And there was a lot of behavioural issues and a lot of challenges and a lot of things that were going on, but I don't remember very often kind of chasing that down and attacking that. It was much more like asking the question. So what's going on? What help do you need? What's happening that you need, or you feel the need to behave that way? I think that I'd like to think that that was the type of teacher I became very quickly. And certainly it's something I've held through my leadership career, that it's never about bad behavior, be about bad choices or things that we decide that are the wrong time, but there's always a root cause to that. There's always something that's triggered that. And until we get to that, these punitive disciplinary, using a very old fashioned word, but these disciplinary methods, I've never seen them work in all the school contexts I've been in. They just make people conform, but they don't necessarily help you support and change your behaviours.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that maybe this is why I was going to ask you about your career then when you were in London. I think maybe this is why that you became a head of department really early on. You were a newly qualified teacher, your early career teacher, and immediately then became head of department. Do you think that may be the reason why is you had this natural kind of affinity with students that potentially were going through quite a difficult time?
Yeah, potentially. I mean, I'd love to think that that was definitely noticed early on by my leaders in that school. I think there was also an element of, I was leading a brand new subject that had just been introduced onto the curriculum at that stage. It was called citizenship studies. I think it's still delivered in the UK now,
Yes,
but at
yeah.
that time it had been rolled out as a compulsory subject. Everybody had to do it, and I was one of the very first people to do a PGCE, which was in history and citizenship studies, down in Sussex, in Brighton. They were, as often down in Sussex and these sort of universities, they were very forward thinking. So I'd completed this PGC and it had citizenship studies in it. So I think I was quite attractive to schools as well when I was interviewing, because they knew it was coming, they knew it was compulsory, and they knew they didn't have anybody trained who really knew what that stood for. So when I came and I was an NQT, and I think it was the deputy head at the time, my NQT mentor, Jim Henderson, I still remember him very well actually. And he spoke to me about citizenship, and he was like, look, we need it, we've got to have somebody teach it, but we need somebody to lead it, and you're the man for the job. And that was, I think, probably about 3 months in. So I'd like to think he did see something in me, because I think he was a very good, I mean, he became a principal and an exceptional school leader. But I think he also had a need. And now as a school leader, I kind of see that pragmatic, I've got a person, I've got a need that works well.
Well, I definitely think we can see that as a combination of the two.
No,
Um,
I'll take that. I'll take that.
yeah, absolutely. Because you then took on from that position and building that relationship with the head, you then took on the head of sixth form for a brand new sixth form at Lambeth Academy in Brixton. What were some of the successes? What were some of the challenges of that time?
That's a long answer to this question, but I'll do my best to keep it short. In reality, so I'd started at this wonderful school called the Charter School. And I couldn't have picked a better place than NQT. It was innovative, forward thinking, taking risks. I'd worked with lots of young teachers and we had great leaders who were developing us. We became an outstanding school, and in that area, I think we were the only one in that borough, at least at that time. I think we were the only one. So we'd done amazing things, and I'd worked with these great group of people who then kind of got headhunted by a big multi-academy trust to go and take on what was their flagship school, Lambeth Academy in Brixton, just at the top of Acre Lane. And they wanted to take a few people with them. And they, you know, if you're going to start in that type of challenging environment, you want a good few around you, I guess.
Yeah.
But the challenges to start with those, the sixth form didn't exist. The school had opened in year 7, 8, 9, was just growing into a sixth form. So we were going to open the sixth form before we even had our own homegrown children. That's a huge challenge. So, you know, I mean, if you can imagine just starting with nothing almost. So those first 2 years, we started with what were called pilot sixth form years. But, you know, we had 50, 60 kids each year that became our responsibility, and their outcomes were our responsibility. So, we were taking in children from all sorts of places, and probably taking in children that other places were saying no to at the time. But we grew that sixth form. But the biggest challenge was starting there with a blank canvas. Conversely, that was also probably the most exciting part of it, because we literally had a blank canvas, and I had the full support of the head at the time. He knew me. I'd worked with him for 5 years, so he was like, "I know what you can do. I know what you can't do. I know what you can deliver. Get on with it." So I had that real freedom, and you know, in reality, that school was more challenging than the previous one. I mean, we'd wanted to get that to outstanding. I don't think it's ever made it there actually in its journey. But we wanted to at least secure good for that community. We wanted it to at least be a good school for that community, which was a difficult area in many ways, but also had every chance of being brilliant. And so we put performing arts, creativity, all these wonderful things in there. I think that blank canvas was amazing. And to get that so early in my career, I don't know many people that have that responsibility, but also that freedom when I was 5 years into teaching to open a sixth form, create partnerships with universities and go around and do all that wonderful stuff, and then grow a sixth form into what was noticed as a good provision by the time I left. So yeah, it was probably the successes and the challenges, I reckon, were the same sort of thing.
Yeah, yeah, incredible experience, like you said, just kind of 5 years in. Um, I mean, and from that position, I mean, I don't want to overuse the word incredible here, but you then took on a position as executive co-head teacher in a secure children's unit at Essex County Council, an incredibly challenging position. Can you tell us a little bit about this experience?
Yeah, definitely. So I won't get too political, but I'd taken a job at Essex County Council to work in their Building Schools for the Future programme, which was a new Labour initiative to basically rebuild every school in the UK. Every school was going to get a new build or a massive renovation. This was the programme. Really exciting, obviously hugely costly, but a really exciting programme. And I probably reached a point in that 9th year in South London where I was definitely feeling somewhat burnt out. I put my heart and soul into it. And perhaps as I indicated before, I was getting into that late 20s where I was starting to go through some of the stuff I'd been through as a child. And I think I'd reached a point where I needed headspace and I needed something different. And so I'd applied for this job as a strategic development officer for Essex County Council, and gone through a range of interviews and been offered the job. And I started on the Building Schools for the Future programme, which is an incredibly exciting programme. And that was in the April. And then in the May, the Conservative government got elected. And the first act that they did was cancel the BSF programme. And I'm sure there were reasons for it. I say I'm not here to be political, but I'm sure there were reasons for it. But I was a month into the job being called in by the Director of Children's Services of Essex County Council to say, right, so this doesn't exist. But we've looked at your CV, Matthew, and we think you've got incredible strengths when it comes to working in challenging environments. So we've got these 3 pupil referral units in Clapton and Canvey Island. We've got this school in Canvey that needs turning into an academy. And we've got this secure children's home that needs bringing from special measures into being at least acceptable or requires improvement, at least so it isn't closed, because otherwise These incredibly vulnerable children would be sent way up north in Yorkshire would be the closest secure children's home. So this was what happened a month into the job. And I was like, oh, okay, I didn't come here for this. This was the exact opposite of what I came for, but let's get on with it. And there's the co-head of education piece at the Secure Children's Home. I got to work with this amazing lady, and I'm racking my brains. I'm sure it was Colleen, but this amazing lady who had this lovely social care background, but was an amazing educator. And she was in there, but she needed some support because it was special measures. It's not easy to turn those types of places around. And with all the contextual challenges, it was even harder. So she'd asked for some support. And Gareth Jones, I think it was at the time, sent me out there, said, go and support Colleen and get on with it. So for 3 months, we worked to convert it, to get it out of special measures, everything we could do. An amazing experience. Not one I'd ever repeat, if I'm honest, Claire. It's not one I'd go back to, but those 3 months of children coming from that secure children's social care unit, being brought out by security guards into the classrooms, which were unlocked and then locked behind for the teachers to teach. Those were really challenging moments. But we did get out of special measures. It did remain open, and I think that was a huge achievement. And then, as I said, I went on to do an academy conversion in Canvey and a couple of crews that I was working with to just support where I could. But I think, shortly after that, I was like, I can't do this anymore. This is the exact opposite of what I was trying to help myself with. And going in and seeing all those incredibly vulnerable kids and what they were going through was just probably not where my brain was at. So I got the job done, but I only lasted a year and a few months at Essex. I couldn't maintain that in those sort of environments, to be honest.
Yeah. That's it. You can't pour for an empty cup, can you?
Huge respect for people that do. I mean,
Yeah.
having seen it, people that spend their careers and their lives doing it, I've got massive respect for people that are able to manage all of that and support, these traumatized children and these challenging environments. I have huge respect for them. Huge respect.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, incredible work that you managed to do that for that year. As you said, you were looking for a position where maybe you were taking into consideration your mental health a little more, and then taking on just such a challenging role must have been incredibly difficult. I mean, from that year, then you then took your first international position, which was in Byron College in Greece. And yeah, and so, what was that move like? Was that inspired by needing a little bit of a different type of challenge?
Yeah, definitely. Look, a really simple answer to it is that I'm very fortunate to be married to this wonderful lady called Maria, who is Greek. And so we were sat there, and I came back from the secure children's home one night, and I was just like, I don't know how long I can do this for.
Yeah.
And so she said, well, look, what do you want to do? And I knew that going back into London wasn't going to work. I'm going back out to any school at that stage. I don't know whether I was there yet in a UK context. I could see what building schools for the future could have done, and I was watching that all disappear. So schools that were kind of half converted, losing their funding, and schools that were waiting, not being funded. So I was just not in the place where I was enamored with what was going on in the UK at the time. And so I thought, well, you know what, I'll just sit and I'll Google, and I just Googled British schools, Athens, Greece. That, as simple as that. 4 of them came up. I sent out CVs to 4 of them, whatever email addresses I could find. I got calls back from 3. I had interviews from 2, and one of them, I was incredibly fortunate to meet the managing director and the daughter of the owner at Byron College, Penny. Met her and was offered the job as a deputy to begin with, to transition in with a lovely head teacher who was there at the time, but who was retiring and who probably wanted to retire a little bit before he was retiring, but was at that point of he needs to retire. And so I was working alongside him for a year to then become the head teacher. So during that year, we worked together on many things, and I learned a lot from that gentleman, and a lot from the team around, and was then, given the chance to become the head teacher of that school eventually, and spend 5 wonderful years at Byron College.
Oh, fantastic! And so 5 years with them, and then a move then to GEMS. So then the Founder School in Dubai. Can you tell us a little bit about the successes, the challenges that you've experienced there?
So 9 years ago. So yeah, no, I mean, nearly 10 years ago, I was connected on LinkedIn from an executive search person who was asking, "Do you want to come and talk to us about GEMS education?" And at that time, I was at the fourth year of my time at Byron. I was in the fifth year. We'd got through a BSO inspection. We'd done a lot of the work that I'd been asked to do. I felt we'd done it.
Mm.
We'd filled the school. There was the first time ever the school was full, and probably with a little waiting list, or a few on the waiting list at least. It was in a very healthy position, and so I hadn't thought about it, but said, "Yeah, why not? Yeah, we'll have a conversation." And then we had a conversation, and then they do, what they do out here, or what I've learned they do out here. They fly you out and they put you up in a nice hotel, and you come and see. And I was brought actually along this road that I'm pointing at out here, and it was just desert, literally just desert. And they said that there's going to be a school here, and we're thinking maybe you could be part of that. So I went home, and then had lots more interviews and assessments. It was incredible the amount I was assessed to get this job. I don't know whether that was because I just wasn't doing well, or whether they just had lots of levels and they just kept putting me through it. But I met so many people in GEMS at that time. And yeah, I was bought out in July 2016. I finished on the 1st of July at Byron, and I started on the 2nd of July here, because we were still working Sundays here at that stage.
Yeah.
So I came out on the Sunday. And I'd been coming out back and forth and doing meet the principals and big events. And, the school opening, my initial target was 320 children, was what I was meant to achieve here at GFS, at GEMS Founder School in Dubai. And we opened with 1,881 children in that first week of September. So again, those successes and challenges actually are the same thing. The success was, wow, this is phenomenal. We've never had an opening like this before, ever. I don't think anybody has opened a school with nearly 2,000 children before. But also the challenge of that is intense.
Yeah.
And it was a brand new building, and we were running generators in the car park for electricity, and we were recruiting teachers up until the day we opened. And it was fortunate that I had the massive organisation that is GEMS Education behind us, because I don't know anybody else that could have delivered what we delivered on that day and make it work. I don't know whether any other organisation could have done that in this context. So we opened it, but the success was definitely there. We opened with huge enrollment numbers, a wonderful team of people, that many of whom are still with me today, 9 years on. Most of my leaders, particularly, are all still here with me. Yeah, we've done something really special out here. We've really disrupted the educational landscape, and the school now, 9 years on, there's now 4 founder schools. I opened 2 more this year with colleagues. So there's now 12,000, nearly 13,000 children being educated in the 4 founder schools, of which this school, GFS, has 6,200 just by itself. So the success story is definitely there and will be told forever, and I will certainly tell it forever. But it's also just, a story based on having an amazing team of people, the backing of a great group that really supported us to get where we needed to, and has allowed me to grow in my role. And we can talk about that as well. But grown in my role and grown in what I'm able to do as a professional, as a leader, exponentially. From the person that joined to the person now, I still think I'm a head teacher, a principal, but I don't think those 2 people are similar in their leadership skills. I'd hope in their values base and who they are, they're probably identical, but in their leadership skills and their ability to pivot and the agility that you learn out here, yeah, that's all come from my experience in these last 9 years.
Incredible. I mean, that experience then in these last 9 years, do you feel like these early experiences that you've had and all these different positions have kind of led you to where you are today, from these roots to where you are today?
Yeah, so I know this is roots to passion, and the roots are really interesting, aren't they? Because I think the experience that I had as a child had every chance that those roots would have just withered and died, to not be dramatic, but there was every chance that those roots wouldn't have survived. But I think because they survived, they were really strong. And
Yeah.
so I think my foundations and me as a human being most of the time, I still have plenty of insecurities and imposter syndrome. So I don't want to present that as if I don't, but most of the time, I back myself on anything that I'm going to get thrown at me,
Mm,
because I think what I've been through and the cycle that I've been through allows me that kind of internal belief. I'm
mm,
not sure what to call it. There's a great term in Korean that I was told. I can't remember the English, but it's called the indomitable spirit. So it's this part of you that is not quite invincible, but is strong enough to be able to overcome whatever is laid in front of you. So I think that has come from developing strong roots that didn't wither and die, but actually were able to grow and flourish.
mm,
Um, and those experiences through my childhood of having that one wonderful teacher, of them working alongside amazing people in that first school. I really, at the chart school, I couldn't have asked for a better group of mentors and coaches and support and friends, whatever you want to call them. They're just amazing. And then going through into that very challenging experience at Essex. Yeah, look, all of that has led to who we are. We are the sum of our parts. Yeah, so
yeah.
I am definitely the sum of my parts, and that means the bad bits and the good bits are all there. But I would, yeah, without hopefully without arrogance, but yeah, I would back myself in nearly all occasions. I mean, I think I've got a level of resilience and a level of experience and a level of knowledge and hopefully a decent skill set to get myself through whatever challenge comes my way next. Who knows
Yeah.
what that will be?
Yeah, absolutely. And it really is, you mentioned there about the people that kind of build you along the way as well. Those influences are just so important in terms of, yeah, kind of continuing to build who you become in the future. Um, thank you so much for sharing. I wanted to finish with one final question, which was to ask you from on the back of such an incredible career, there's that word again, on the back of such a brilliant career. um, what advice might you have, or what advice might you give to an aspiring school leader?
So I like the rule of three. I think most of us do. So I'll do three if that's okay. Just
Yeah.
three simple ones, yeah. So I think three is the first. Would I would say definitely is the culture that you create in your school, which is always going to be with the people and the community and the demographics and everything. But the culture you create, protect it at all costs. So I think that for me is so important. No matter whether you're going through growth, no matter whether you're having challenges and you're on a decline, which might be even worse in some respects in an international private school context. But whatever the challenges that are coming at you, keep that culture and nurture it and treat it very kindly and gently and protect it so that it constantly resonates in all parts of the school, whether it be in the offices, the staff room, the corridors, or the classrooms. That culture, I think, drives almost all things in a school or an ecosystem like this. I think it's really important. So protect the culture at all costs. And then the second piece of advice I would say is invest in your people. And I don't just mean financially, but invest in them emotionally, invest in their professional development, their learning, care about them. And I mean that as softly as it may sound, but genuinely care about them, give them your heart and soul. Make sure they know that they're really important to you, they're really important to what you're doing. Empower them, give them freedom to operate. Something I've banged on about every year at SLT, and they're probably bored of me hearing about it, but I always talk about psychological safety.
Mm,
Challenge and tell me I'm wrong, and that's fine, it's okay, but we're then going to leave that room and we're going to have an agreement. So once we leave the room, then we're done, you know. So second one, as I say, invest in your people, empower them, support them. And then look, the third one is, and this is one that I'm not very good at, but I'll give it as advice because you asked me for advice rather than anything I'm good at. But the third one is probably look after yourself. Because I think as a leader, and it's mental health day today, I'm wearing green. You can't see, but I'm wearing green.
yeah.
But in reality, it's you've got to look after yourself. You've got to make sure that you take care of yourself. You've got to make sure that you take those moments to fill your cup, but to use a phrase we've both said a couple of times, and you've got to take moments where you reflect and celebrate the things that are going well. I mean, I know some of the milestones we've hit along the years, which are just phenomenal. But I know, and this is something I'm still working through, but I know we got it, and then it was really anticlimactic because I was like, okay, on to the next. I
Mm.
didn't allow myself to enjoy it, I mean, we got outstanding in our BSO inspection. I was like, oh, that's brilliant, cool. Okay, so tomorrow, I
Yeah.
felt myself doing it. I'm getting better at reining myself back in, but it was almost like, okay, so let's move on. And you've got to let yourself celebrate every win, small and big. And so I think looking after yourself as a school leader sounds really simple. I opened with it. I stick with it. I'm not very good at it myself. But then if you invest in your people really well, they'll take care of you. If your culture's really strong, they'll take care of you. And then if you're like me and you're not very good at doing it yourself, then at least the first two parts will make sure that you stay healthy and well and survive and thrive throughout the leadership journey that you're going to take. Because for me, school leaders, teachers, most important profession in the world, creates all other professions, has to be protected and nurtured and flourishing at all costs, and that can be hard sometimes. So yeah, hopefully those three little bits of advice may be helpful for a school leader out there listening.
Absolutely. Matthew, thank you so much for sharing. That was I feel really inspired. It was so wonderful to hear about your journey and to hear those pieces of really valuable advice as well. Thank you so much. You can learn more about Matthew underneath this article. And yeah, Matthew, thank you so much. I hope that our paths will meet again shortly and we might be able to collaborate again in the future.
Thank you, Claire. I really enjoyed talking with you. It was very easy to do so. And yeah, look, I'm sure there's lots of times and occasions that our paths will cross in the future. So I hope that too as well.
Thank you.